You're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski. So glad to be back with you all once again. We're going to challenge toxic groupthink together on a variety of issues in the news and in our culture today. And we're going to hit the ground running. We've got a clip queued up here from Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I want to dismantle a myth right now on the news that's been going around, because it's not about partisanship. It's about telling the truth and not creating blame games based on mass hallucination like groupthink does. So let's roll that tape and we'll get into it.
Many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
But he said specifically that he was condemning them.
He did not. He said he walked out and he said,
Sir,
let's get this straight.
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
And when the president was asked about it, he said,
they should be condemned totally.
Racist and not condemn them.
They should be condemned totally.
He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides.
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Just a week ago yesterday was the third anniversary of the events in Charlottesville.
Other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
You remember what the president said when asked?
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides.
So what you just saw there is an example of media mass hallucination being dismantled. And whether you like Trump or not, you cannot bear false witness and maintain your sanity. If you keep lying and lying and lying just for power, you're going to get consumed by that pursuit of power and lose your own sanity, your own happiness, your own everything. And so this is a warning to folks that you can't go around slandering and lying about people that you don't like. That's barbaric, and we're just not going to have that in civilization. And so whether you disagree with Trump, which I have a lot of disagreements on policies, I don't think we should have trillions of dollars in debt. I don't think we should, still be doing the bidding of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, or doing the bidding of the military-industrial complex by not still getting out of Afghanistan after all this time. There's a lot of disagreements, but that's a civilized, mature, normally functioning adult knows how to disagree with someone without going into a mass hallucination like the old corporate dinosaur media has tried to create with that story about the Charlottesville rally or whatever was going on with that, and how they've lied for years about what Donald Trump said about that. They said that he was talking about, as we explained or as we showed in that clip, they were saying that he was praising these neo-Nazis and white nationalists. Joe Biden's entire mythology for him running, right? His entire mythology for him coming out of retirement after having a great 50-year record of being in the service of perpetual war and occupation of people of color around the world, of locking people of color up around this country, after having such a stellar mainstream media, CBS, NBC, ABC approved track record. They've dusted him off the shelf of retirement, brought him out, and his entire narrative, his old justification for low information folks to vote for him was that this it was clear that he denounced it. And so nature of the media, that's such a relationship to controlling the narrative. They do not want to report the stories. They do not want to be honest. They are PR firms for giant corporations. that want the status quo of the state religion to continue unabated. And Donald Trump is a heretic in the supreme religion of political correctness, which dominates and controls much of our institutions of culture and government bureaucracy today. And so because he does not use politically correct language, and because he dares to challenge some of the sacred cows of our imperial foreign policy, which is anti-American and anti-human and anti-decency, to the tune of $1 trillion a year, because he dares to question that, he is too much of a challenge to the status quo, and therefore they create 24/7 hallucinations for folks to the point where they can look at the tape, see that he denounces white nationalists and neo-Nazis, and then they literally, this shows you, folks, that the veneer that human beings are rationally driven creatures is totally fabricated. And it's not something that is based on one political party. It is based on you see what you want to see, and you feel what you want to feel. And humans are very notorious for not being very good at self-correcting once they've bought into a narrative that justifies their self-righteousness. Once they've bought into it and then they get exposed, actually, this is totally wrong. It's just like a cult indoctrination. Once you drink the Kool-Aid, once you've joined the Koresh compound or whatever it is, and you've invested into it at a certain point of skin in the game and involvement in the speech codes and holiness codes and purity codes of that particular in group, it is extremely difficult for people to be exercised of that possessive spirit of the crowd. And so that's the nature of this program. This is the program, we call this a political exorcist program, because we are here to exorcise those toxic groupthink ideologies out of everyone that we engage with. You have to do that, and the only way you can do it is to understand the personhood revolution of Jesus and how he exercises groupthink out like nobody else. Nobody in history has ever challenged and deprogrammed and brought people back to their personal dignity rather than being a collective cog in a ideological machine. And that goes for Republicans too, because again, the fact that they trot out Nikki Haley and these folks like that shows that the Republican Party is not the enemy, is not the ally for liberty. They're not the ally for pro-life that they have branded themselves to be. They just aren't. But there are some good folks that you can have a conversation there, and therefore it's a meaningful place to at least try to engage folks and bring them to the truth, if they have at least an open mind to some degree on some of these issues that are pressing for our society's very health. And so that's something that I just wanted to deal with, that media mythology. Another story that's in the news today is the NHL has postponed all playoff games, according to David Hookstead, in solidarity with the NBA, according to multiple reports. So, this is the NHL Hockey League has postponed the playoff games. The NBA, I guess they've decided to reverse course on their protest. But, this is an interesting development because I wrote an article a few years ago called The End of Football, in which I described the fact that the NFL will probably not last till 2050 at the rate it's going because of how politicized the entire thing has become. The whole purpose of a sport is that you are able to simulate warfare, join a team, and forget about your everyday troubles, the office problems, the politics, the election, all those different things. You put that on the shelf and you go into this fantasy ritual of simulated warfare where you root for your team and you go wild and you lose your sense of self and you become part of this Borg of the team and this loyalty of us versus them. And it's meant to channel some of that pent up anger, that pent up need to belong that we lose so much of because we don't have community values anymore. We don't have civic institutions. We don't have a healthy church environment, especially this year with all the churches going on Zoom only and so forth. And so people need that camaraderie. They need that sense of belonging. They need that sense of vicariously participating in a kind of, shared catharsis that they can conquer another team in simulated, combat or sports games and athletic excellence or what have you. But to suspend all of this stuff is a very kind of dangerous thing to pursue in this time, because if people don't have the opportunity to, channel that, and a lot of people, some people don't need it, but some people do, it's like a certain percentage of the population, that's what they use as a kind of pacifier, pacify. And I'm not saying anything bad against sports. I'm saying it's a reality. People have documented the evidence that this thing kind of pacifies folks when you can participate in a team ritual and cathartically, have that special checking out of your normal mundane stresses and tensions. And to remove that from people and to put politics into it, especially a group like BlackLivesMatter.com, where they're saying we want to dismantle the nuclear family. So, it doesn't make any sense to have any kind of divisive political message like that, where you want to dismantle the nuclear family. Then these groups like NBA and NFL and NHL apparently are on board with that ideology of dismantling the nuclear family. They've certainly been doing that for decades, haven't they, with the promotion of the kind of anti-family values that you typically see in pop culture, sports, entertainment as well. Anyway, so it's something that I think bodes a negative thing when it comes to the hope that we can have a more peaceful society. If you don't have those pacifiers available for people to check out of their mundane tensions, and they have their politics bleeding into their time of relaxation with sports, then you're in a situation where it can be very problematic. That's not something you want to mess around with, and I think it could be spelling that there will be more conflict and more unrest to come in America, because people need a place where they can vent their tribalism. They need a place where they can vent a lot of folks need that. And I think we're going to suspend these things to our own cultural detriment. But who knows? You never know. People may be able to find a way to channel their tension and their blame games and their anger in a different way, hopefully a constructive and nonviolent way. We'll be back in just a moment, live on Neighbor's Choice with more news and analysis. Stay tuned. Hello, this is David Gronowski, host of A Neighbor's Choice. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, on my program each week, dissecting the news and making the case for freedom, capitalism, and a family-friendly society. Now you can join Jeff and I this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event at the Azalea Lodge in the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Noted scholar Dr. Patrick Newman and Jeff Deist will provide a fun pre-election discussion along with light refreshments. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. It's just $20 to get in, and space is limited. Join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Azalea Lodge at Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Go to Mises.org to register. That's Mises.org. See you there this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
I'm attorney Young Kim. The financial problems caused by the coronavirus nightmare are not going away anytime soon. If you are behind on your credit card or mortgage payments, or bill collectors are harassing you, there are ways to get them off your back and legally wipe the slate clean. Call Consumer Law Attorneys at 888-99-FRESH for a free consultation. Learn how we can stop the bank and collection companies and help people in debt get a fresh start. Call 888-99-FRESH, 37374. Main office, St. Petersburg.
Nobody wants to get ripped off, broken into, or robbed, but nobody wants to pay a lot of money to have their home protected either. I've got an offer to tell you about to provide home security for your home. For less than $1 a day with no other costs, you can get your home secured. Plus, get a lifetime equipment replacement warranty. You need protection for your home. Call the Home Security Hotline right now.
800-361-3491. Again, that's 800-361-3491.
I saw a quote today from Nicole Jones of CBS News. She says something like the quote is, destroying property which can be replaced is not violence. And you've heard this before, that the media tries to make a pass for folks who are in left-wing oriented, or what I call reactionary movements that want to repeal the progress of civilization in which individual persons are dignified no matter who they are. Okay, you don't get to, if someone is unjustly shot and if someone is injured, and if that's what you want to deal with, you don't get to deny the human dignity of another innocent person who's done nothing to mess with you. And that includes destroying their property. And it is violent to destroy someone's property because that is an extension of their personhood. That's the extension of their fruits, of their labor that they've mixed in time and space and worked hard towards to have. And you can talk about different types of theft, like a more petty, just stealing a cookie or something, which is still wrong. But if you're burning down people's entire businesses and getting into these violent escalations like we're seeing in Wisconsin, that's not nonviolent. That's violent. It's aggressive. It's mobbish, and it's unchristian to do this. We have a society today where 70% of our country says they're Christian. Then we need to know what that means. So, one thing I wanted to address is, what is the difference between the foundational cultural, philosophy behind, say, libertarianism, or what they call classical liberalism, which is more along the lines of a lot of the founding fathers and their Enlightenment values that they were developing with John Locke and others. So classical liberalism / libertarianism, which if you're a member of the Republican Party, your party uses that classical liberal and libertarian message to try to sell themselves to the public. Now, they don't govern anyway like that. They govern big government, Keynesian, big consumerism spending, big giant apparatus of the state because they can make money for big corporations, but they sell themselves with libertarian and classical liberal rhetoric, liberty, freedom, personal responsibility. And those things, there's some good things there. But here's the difference. The way I see the difference between libertarianism as it's culturally grounded versus what I talk about, which is the personhood revolution of Jesus, is that it's a difference in focus. One is focusing on the I, on me. It's my inalienable right. It's my right. It's my right. It's my right, right? And the other one focuses, which is the Jesus way, is where you focus on the other first. So one is focused on rights, like I have a sovereign, inalienable right to say what I want to say and do what I want to do because I'm the master of my life. That's the libertarian, classical liberal, roughly speaking, ideology. And I don't find that to be true. I find it that rights are just an Enlightenment concept. But what's more important is what's right and wrong. And what's right and wrong for you in relationship to how you treat your neighbor. See how you see the Christian focus treats the focus on the neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say love yourself as yourself. It says love your neighbor as yourself. So there's a focus on what is my obligation in relationship to my neighbor. See, Jesus puts the onus on how are we going to treat the other first, not, well, you are the master of your destiny. What do you want to do? Go maximize your freedom. That framework, I understand the ideas behind it, and it certainly has an appeal for Americans of all political philosophies. But that framework, I believe, is a dead end because it's not real. It's not true. You're not the master of your desires. Your desires master you. You are not the master of yourself. Yourself is an amalgamation of things that you have borrowed from those around you who have shaped your identity of who you are. And so when I look at Christianity, I see a more intellectually grounded and rigorous understanding of the human self and an understanding of how ethics and morality should be understood, which is that you are in conversation with how are we going to deal with our neighbor. So here's how it looks. You know, a libertarian or classical liberal approach will say, it's my inalienable right to do, to have an AR-15 and to wield it as this way or that way. Whereas the Christian would say, well, how should I treat my neighbor in this situation? If they are doing something that I don't like, do I have the right to use violence to stop them? You see the difference? It's a focus. It's on, one is looking at me, I. The other one's looking at the other, the neighbor. And you might think that's a minor thing, but it means the world of difference in the kind of culture that's going to crop up and develop up in that kind of soil. So if you have a society that says it's all about me, I'm the master of my destiny, that mentality, it's going to lead to the dead end where libertarianism has no political power. We have a culture of individualism that has manifested as big government, big business, collectivism. So something's weird here in our culture where you'd think, wait a second, a libertarian worldview on an individual basis should manifest as a libertarian political world where we have limited government. That's not necessarily the case. It's actually this weird paradox in which the more we're focused on the self and self-absorption and egoism and individualism, then it creates this society in which people are only thinking about themselves. They think that they're the masters of themselves, and therefore that's the foundation for their moral standards for how they think of creating laws and voting for laws and being a part of a justice system. But if you think about it from the Christian standpoint, then your concern is not so much about rights as it is about what's right and wrong and the way I treat my neighbor. So if you see a drug like cocaine, the libertarian enlightenment view might be something like, it's my right to do as much cocaine as I want as long as I'm not messing with you. And it just does not resonate with the human spirit. But a Christian would say, well, I don't forget that. Cocaine addiction is a problem. We don't like that. We don't support that. And the question is, what does Jesus ask us to do? And he says it very clearly, do not resist evil with violence. Is cocaine addiction evil? Yes. Does Jesus say to resist it with violence? No. He says, don't resist it with violence. So if you trust in Jesus, which is what it means to have faith in Jesus, then you would actually listen to that sentence and you'd actually start to apply it as it relates to real issues of sin and evil in society. And if you trusted him, you'd find out that you can condemn something as wrong and actually dismantle its power in people's lives through nonviolent creativity like Jesus did, rather than the stupid old way of coercion like the old world order that he defeated did. Back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
Ronald Reagan would turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040. WHP.
The damage left behind from Hurricane Laura still being assessed in Louisiana after it slammed into the coast as a Category 4. At least 4 people are dead. The power outages now topping 840,000 across 4 states. President Trump today making a visit to FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C., getting briefed on the storm and recovery efforts. He says the Gulf Coast was lucky overall, The president says he'll move forward with his national convention speech tonight and touting the economy for bouncing back during this pandemic.
The country's doing very well economically. We're on a V. It could even be a super V.
Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris, though, today in a speech slamming the president's policies, saying he failed to protect Americans from the pandemic and ignored science and programs, even one developed by President Obama and Joe Biden, showing the possibility of pandemics.
The program tracked emerging diseases in places like China. Trump cut it.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm David Granosky, your host here. Our website, neighborschoice.com. You can listen live there or catch all of our podcasts and radio broadcasts. We do both a radio show, which you're listening to now on FM or AM or online worldwide. And we also do a podcast where we do more of a deep dive, and that's online only. It's called Things Hidden. Look up Things Hidden. Just search for it on our website. You'll see all the episodes we have. And you can find it on any podcast platform like iTunes and Google and all that. And we're now joined by someone who we've had on the program before, but he is a active voice against the unjust criminal justice system that we have. He's been recently released on compassionate release after having a long, arduous sentence for a nonviolent crime. We have Chad Marks with us. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing well. How are you, David?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you on the program again. And I got to tell you, you got a lot of people who are working to, get your voice out there. And I think you've got an important voice. Of course, Amy Pova of the Can Do Clemency Foundation introduced me to your story originally. But then I saw Mark Holden, who's with a lot of the criminal justice reform stuff. He gave a shout out to you as well today. So I'm glad to see that you've been able to build a community of support around your work.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate them. Amy Pova at Can Do, she does an excellent job. She's trying to help a lot of people too. And Mark Holden, I mean, he's a godsend, and certainly appreciate all the work that he does down there in D.C.
Yeah, I want to get into kind of the latest things that you've been working on in the criminal justice system. You were telling me about this idea before the show that they call it it's C-924. Is that right? It's a section of law in the federal law. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's 18 U.S.C. 924C, and for years, what's been happening in courtrooms across the nation is they've been stacking sentences. And what I mean by that is if you have one 924C, you would get a 5 years, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. If you had a second 924C, it's an additional 25 consecutive to any and all other charges in the case. So you might have a guy such as Weldon Angelos that a lot of people are familiar with. He had a marijuana case, but on 3 occasions there was a gun allegedly involved in his case. So the first gun was 5 years, the second gun was 25 years, and the third gun was another 25 years. So he ended up with a 55-year sentence. And you got guys across the nation that are serving hundreds and hundreds of years based off of that 18 U.S.C. 924C stacking charge.
So tell folks a little bit about this in detail. Let's go into the Weldon Angelos story. Could you tell me a little bit about that before the break? And we've had him on the program, but can you explain, just walk us through how that, sentencing was done with his case?
Okay. So this is what happened, right, with Weldon. They allegedly sent an informant to purchase marijuana from him. I think it was a small amount, and the government alleged that he had a gun on him. So when they made that purchase of narcotics, they never arrested him. They left him in the street. But they did that for a reason. They did that so they can send that same informant again to purchase marijuana from him, hoping that he would have a gun on him. So when they made the second purchase, according to the informant, he had another gun on him. So now he was at 5 plus 25. He was at 30 years. But that wasn't good enough. So what they did was they sent the informant again a week later to make another small amount purchase of marijuana, and they alleged that he had a weapon on him again. So now it was 55 years. And what they were doing was they would do this all across the nation. Instead of arresting people when they say that they're a threat to public safety because they were committing a crime, they wouldn't arrest them at that point. They would wait another week in order to get them with another gun charge, because if they only had the one gun charge, it was 5 years. But as long as they left them in the street for another week, they can get them with another gun charge and add an additional 25 years on there. So that's kind of what happened with Weldon. That's kind of what happened with me. I had a 40-year sentence at the age of 24. The first gun was 5, the second gun was 25, and I got 10 years for the drugs, so I had a 40-year sentence. Courts in courtrooms across the nation, they've been doing this for years. And most recently, with the First Step Act, what they did was Congress came in and said, no, that's wrong. That's not what we intended. So they had a section in there called the clarification of 924C. And what Congress said was, no, we meant this to be a recidivist enhancement. We didn't mean for the government to be able to stack these 924C charges in one indictment. And the First Step Act changed it. Well, they didn't change it. They just clarified it. They clarified what they always meant. So now you can only get 5 years for the gun, not a second 25 years, unless you're a true recidivist.
So go ahead.
The problem, David, is this. They said that it was wrong. They said that the court's been misapplying the law, that the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office have been misapplying the law, but they didn't make it retroactive. It only applies to people that are arrested now. I think that's outrageous.
So the Justice Department interceded and kind of stopped that from taking effect, the reform, right? Am I getting that right?
Well, I'm not sure exactly why it wasn't made retroactive. I think there was some negotiations, on both sides of the aisle. I know that someone had told me that the fraternity of the police, I think, would not support the First Step Act if it was made retroactive. You had people like Senator Cotton that was against it. I think Senator Cruz and a few other people. They were against it being retroactive. But, I mean, it's outrageous to say that a law is wrong and say we're going to fix it, we're going to make sure that it's not wrong anymore, but it doesn't apply to the people that have been sitting in prison suffering for the last 15, 20, 30 years based on 924C stacking.
Yeah, and I'm just going to speak here a little bit on Cruz and Tom Cotton, because they represent a lot of different folks in America that think a similar way. They talk a big game about being a Christian. They talk a big game about being pro-life. I think in order to be truly pro-life, you can't just be pro-life for people who are unborn. You got to be pro-life for people who are born and are having a violent, out-of-control state rob them of their dignity and their life for nonviolent crimes, especially when a lot of these different laws that we have on the books are not lawful. They're lawless laws. I call them anti-laws because they're not creating order. They're creating violence and chaos in the neighborhoods in which those laws are enacted. They're dividing families. They're separating people. They're creating brokenness in the home. They're creating fatherlessness. They're creating generations of bitterness and poverty and an inability to get out of poverty and get on with life and build wealth, like the so-called capitalists like Cruz and Tom Cotton always say is very easy. It's not easy to do when you have a family member locked up for decades for a first-time nonviolent crime. It's not easy to do. And it's not easy to believe in the legitimacy of folks like Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz when they say they're for the Second Amendment, but then they want to lock up someone for 55 years because they had a pistol in their house, allegedly. They didn't even use it, weren't threatening anybody with it, but because they have it and they have a substance with them, therefore the Second Amendment doesn't apply to them. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense. It's a bunch of hypocrisy.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things in our system that I don't believe in. And one of them is exactly what we're talking about now with the 924C. And I want to highlight a case, if you'll let me. There's a guy out of Utah named Kepa Mau Mau. He had stacked 924Cs. His judge used the compassionate release statute to reduce his sentence. Unfortunately, he ran into the same problem I ran into. The government appealed his case before he could actually be released from prison. And the government's now appealing that, and Mau Mau's stuck in jail. And, he's not Caucasian. And we have a guy that was recently released in Pennsylvania for the same thing. He was serving a 213-year sentence. And, from what I've been told, the government's not appealing his case, but they are appealing Mau Mau's case. So when we talk about systemic racism, sometimes people think it's just a word, and people say, well, that's not what's really going on. But when we look at the criminal justice system, and we have someone that's non-white in Utah that has the same charges, and he's still sitting in jail, although his judge said that she believes that he's rehabilitated, that the change in law was an extraordinary and compelling reason to reduce his sentence. And then we have a white guy in Pennsylvania that gets out and they're not appealing his case, but yet they're appealing Mau Mau's. I think there's an issue there. I don't think that's equal justice under the law the way that the framers intended.
And but then you have other cases where people are getting life sentences for first-time nonviolent drug offenses, and they're Caucasian people too. So it's a sick system, no matter who you look at, and it's hard to the problem I have when they always want to turn it into a racial narrative for all this stuff is that it doesn't actually stop the laws. Like we need to repeal the laws that are putting people in these sentences in the first place. And whenever you say, well, it's primarily a race thing, then all they do is they say, we're going to have sensitivity training. We're going to have increased, sensitivity training in the police forces. We're going to have a kind of window dressing stuff. I want the laws repealed. So what are the laws that we need to do to get rid of some of these sentences from being, what laws do we need to get rid of, Chad, from your study of the law?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of laws. I think one of the first places to begin with, Dave, is we need to go back into the First Step Act where we got these sentencing reforms, and those need to be made retroactive because they changed them, they fixed them, right? We got nonviolent drug offenders serving life sentences under subsection 851 enhancements that prosecutors use when people want to exercise their right to trial. I think that's something that needs to be fixed. Like I said, the 924C stuff has to be retroactive. We have 18 U.S.C. 3553A that says a sentence must be sufficient but not greater than necessary to achieve the goals of sentencing. Mm-hmm. So if we're applying that law, but we're giving people life sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, how is that sufficient? Right. But not greater than necessary to achieve the goals of sentencing? I mean, taxpayers are spending their money on rehabilitation programs and trying to better people in prison. And when then people are rehabilitated, we're going to leave them in prison for the rest of their lives? Right. That's a waste of taxpayer money. So I think we need to apply, that 3553A. It has to be applied. It has to be followed. We have mandatory minimums that are just, and I mean, we all know what happened with the 1994 crime bill, but we have mandatory minimums that just need to be repealed, man. We need change, and we need to demand change. We can't just keep talking about it. Like you said, sensitivity training ain't getting people out of prison that deserve to get out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the unrest on the streets right now is a product of people not doing enough to get rid of these unjust sentencings, because it's unjust, not just the sentence length, but it's also unjust in having to enforce things. It's like, for example, like I tell people all the time, alcohol has done more violence, or hasn't. It's not done itself, but it has been the occasion for more violence than almost anything else that is currently banned in our country. And it was violent to go after alcohol drinkers during Prohibition and use violence of the state to stop them from doing it. And I think that so much of the chaos in our cities is a product of having unjust laws, unjust use of the law. Something can be wrong, Chad, I think, and still not be used as a criminal thing. You know what I mean? Adultery is wrong. But we're not going to make a law that says if we see you in adultery, we're going to give you 50 years because you're a threat to the decency. So not all things that are wrong should be criminalized. And I think that's where the conversation ultimately needs to go. I guess I can ask you, did you feel, like your sentence was a rehabilitating thing for you in your particular case? My
sentence?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not at all. I was 24 years old and was sentenced to 40 years.
Right.
In prison. But I had a plea agreement for 10 years, and I mean, there was issues with the attorney and why that wasn't accepted. But I ended up exercising my constitutional right to trial. And when I did that, there was a penalty. There was a trial penalty. Because I dared to put the government to their proof, I ended up with a 40-year sentence when the plea agreement was for 10 years.
So, Chad, looking back when you were 24, leading up to that time, instead of a 40-year sentence for a 24-year-old for nonviolent offense, what would have been a better alternative for you if you could go back in time to kind of help you get away from those choices that you didn't want to make?
Well, David, I'm going to be honest with you, and it's not always easy to say this, but I believe that I deserve to go to prison. I do. I believe that I deserve to go to prison, but I didn't deserve a 40-year sentence.
Right.
I think a sentence in the 8-year range, because there has to be some type of punishment. I believe that, but I think with an 8-year sentence, I would have done about 6 years. I'd have been able to go in there and get some education, better myself, and I think I would have been able to come out of there a productive citizen, because I would have appreciated what the framers found so important, and that is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I did deserve to go to prison, but I just didn't deserve a 40-year sentence. But I needed a wake-up call.
Right. What about folks currently in the prison system now? So again, just trying to recap for people, what do you think is the first priority for all folks who are listening of various political ideology? What's the first priority you want them to know that needs to be changed in our justice system that they can be a part of changing?
Well, I think we should demand change as far as equal justice. I think that we should get rid of mandatory minimums. I mean, we have federal judges in positions for a reason, but if there's mandatory minimums, they can't use their discretion. So I think, some of the first things that should be done is this. I think that all the people that are eligible, that would have been eligible under the First Step Act, if the laws were retroactive, I think they should be getting clemency. I think that we should be talking about these mandatory minimums that are absolutely outrageous. I think those need to be fixed. I think we should be really concentrating compassionate release stuff, because we have people dying all over the federal prison system from COVID-19. I think we're up to 120 deaths. I think that's something that people should step up for right now, and even the President Trump can step in right now. You've got people with a year or less in federal prison that are possibly going to turn into a death sentence. Yeah. So those are the things that I would be focusing on: mandatory minimums, fixing, making the criminal statutes that were changed with the First Step Act, making those retroactive, and start looking at some real compassionate releases or clemency for people that have a year or less left that are sitting in federal prisons that could possibly die.
Well, very good. Chad Marks, always a pleasure to hear from you. We'll keep following your work, and welcome to come on another time and update us with what the latest things are happening in that space. So thanks again, and we'll keep following you.
Thank you. Thank you to you, David. I appreciate you and what you're doing. And Amy Pova, Mark Holden, all of them as well.
Very good. We'll continue live on A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, your host. You can email us hello@aneighborschoice.com if you have a comment, a guest suggestion. We always enjoy hearing from you all there. hello@aneighborschoice.com. Back in a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski, host of A Neighbor's Choice. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, on my program each week, dissecting the news and making the case for freedom, capitalism, and a family-friendly society. Now you can join Jeff and I this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event at the Azalea Lodge in the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Noted scholar Dr. Patrick Newman and Jeff Deist will provide a fun pre-election discussion along with light refreshments. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. It's just $20 to get in, and space is limited. Join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Azalea Lodge at Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Go to Mises.org to register. That's Mises.org. See you there this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
The Federal Reserve is rightly worried that the coronavirus will continue to weigh heavily on economic activity. This is Greg C. Truax with On the Point. The Fed, which has an expansive monetary policy, wants Congress to appropriate an additional round of rescue funding to help get the economy moving forward. Consider that consumer confidence dropped in August, and the unemployment rate is 10.2%, above the pre-pandemic level of 3.5%. And the Congressional Budget Office has projected that the coronavirus pandemic, adjusted for inflation, will cost the economy a whopping $7.9 trillion over the next 10 years. The estimates reflect expectations of future lower consumer spending and business investment. It's clear that Republicans and Democrats in Congress need to compromise and immediately enact another pandemic rescue package. This is Greg C. Truax.
For over 18 years, I've enjoyed an AV rating of 5.0 out of 5.0 from Martindale Hubbell. I received this from my fellow lawyers and judges. If you've been injured, call Diaco Law at 888-SOS-FIRM. At Diaco Law, we will take your call.
Medical malpractice or wrongful death? Call SOS. Call Diaco Law at 888-SOS-FIRM for a free injury case evaluation.
And remember, there's no fees or costs unless we win. At Diaco Law, we will take your call.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski. We just heard from Chad Marks about some of the things that we need to do to reform our criminal justice system. And I think, we're going to have to come together and get rid of a lot of these bad laws, because I think it's a haunting thing on our society. And it is not about political correctness. I challenge political correctness more than anyone, because I understand that it's a cheap imitation of Jesus, because I understand the anthropology that Jesus reveals to us in the gospel stories of his life. So I get the fatal problem with political correctness, but just because politically correct ideology wants to take the mantle of criminal justice and make it their thing, doesn't mean it actually is rooted in their ideas. Here's the reason. How can you have respect for human life if individual personal life is not sacred? Think about that. It's just a rootless idea. So for the folks in politically correct leftist ideology, they don't acknowledge that individual personal lives should be protected from initiation of coercion from society. So they don't see the dignity of each human being being something that you should respect to the point where you don't allow violence to be done on them, right? So do not resist evil with violence. That's what I'm talking about. That's not about self-defense. If you think about the principle of do not resist evil with violence, which is the same passage where he says, turn the other cheek, Jesus is not talking about someone's barging into your house, they're attacking your family, and you're just supposed to sit there and allow people to be assaulted. No. That's not what that's about. Because if you look at the analogies that he uses, turn the other cheek, right? Is that a life-threatening situation? Is he saying, if they're coming, if intruders come in and are killing your kids, you just sit there and pray? No, he's not saying that whatsoever. So do not resist evil with violence is not about attacking the idea of self-defense or protecting the lives of people being attacked themselves. No. It's not about that. It's about shame. Because the idea of a slap, right? You slap someone, it's the first slap is a backhand, right? And then if you turn the cheek, now he's got to slap you with his palm forward, right? So what happens there now in that era, that would be saying that he is now an equal with you. If you backhand someone, that means that they're beneath you. And if you turn the other cheek, now they would have to strike you with their palm forward, and that makes you an equal. So it's a nonviolent protest against shameful attempts to keep you in a place of a shrunken space, of a place of humiliation. And so I take that principle, and then I take every aspect of Jesus' life. And you can see that same non-violence practice in everything he does. Not an attack on self-defense, but on this. No aggression, no vengeance. You see the difference? There is a place for self-defense in a society that is rooted in the ethic of Jesus. If someone is attacking a vulnerable elderly lady, and you have the means to stop that attack and physically restrain that person, then you should do so if you're able to do that. And that's not wrong. Jesus is not looking at you in history and saying, shame on you for putting that attacker into a headlock or whatever and saving that woman's life. No, no, no. That is a cheap fake. And you know what's funny about the folks? There are some folks who are Christian pacifists, so-called, and they'll say that, right? They'll say, oh, yeah, I would not send a single... I would not lift a single finger on someone attacking, my family or anybody, because that was true Christianity. And I'm like, well, wait a second. But then you call the police, or you vote for Joe Biden, who bombs people of color around the world and locks people up. So you are for the use of force in ways that are even egregious. Some of these folks that say they're pacifists, because they wouldn't strike someone individually, but they'll call the police to round up somebody's AR-15 because you're scared of that gun being used in a bad way. You got, 10 million people owning AR-15s, 10 million, maybe more in America? Most of those people are not using it in a violent, aggressive way, but you're going to initiate violence onto them. That's not Christian. Do not resist evil with violence. The idea behind that is if you think it's a shame that a person owns an AR-15, then use nonviolent ways. You can do a boycott. You can boycott their business if they have an AR-15. Go ahead. You can persuade them. You can take them out to lunch. You can do all kinds of methods. You cannot associate with them if you don't like AR-15s. Those are all nonviolent things that you can use. But you cannot use violence. You cannot employ the initiation of violence if you're a Christian. And I would submit to you that if more pastors would actually understand this message and teach it from the pulpit, then we wouldn't have the cities burning around this country right now. Because the church is the place where you're supposed to get the house of Jesus. And if we had set the captives free decades ago, and if we had stopped this stupid war on drugs by big government people who worship the state instead of imitating Jesus, if we had stopped these things, we wouldn't have created this calcified, nihilistic culture in which nobody wants to believe that the church is sincere when it comes to standing for life. Because if you stand for life in the womb, then you don't send an innocent, nonviolent person into the womb of big government for decades for a nonviolent crime. Why is it wrong to hurt a child in the womb? It's wrong to lay a finger on somebody who hasn't done anything to you. Extend that same principle to someone who's been locked up for a drug addiction. Did they lay a finger on you? Then why are you putting a finger on them? Why are you putting them in harm's way where they can have violence done to them and they can't escape? That is a form of anti-life mentality, and the church has got to get this message, because if you don't, we are going to reap the whirlwind. I'm telling you, you got to get this message, folks. If you're listening to me and you're part of the church, you have to understand this for your own survival, even if you don't want to care about why it's really important, which is to have the love of Jesus for your neighbor. If you can't go that far, you want to lock everybody up because you think you're cool, well, you're not cool. And you're not tough, you're just a clown. Because if you set the nonviolent captives free, you're going to heal the brokenness, the fatherlessness, the generational poverty. You're going to heal racial tensions. You're going to heal this divide in our land. And it's time for you to step up, church. I'm counting on you guys to step up. Do the right thing. I'm David Gronowski. Back in a moment.